What do you do, Tammy? Like when you get a phone call from, first of all, if you get a phone call from a buyer who's unrepresented, and they said they want to see a $3 or $4 million listing, how do you handle that? What types of questions do you ask?
Well, definitely, I make clear that in order to even secure the appointment, we're likely going to have to produce verification of assets, right? And it's so interesting that we had planned to talk about this because not an hour ago, I got a phone call from a new buyer prospect. Now, this one happened to come as a referral from someone who has sent me a number of very well qualified buyers over the years. So I have kind of a sense that they are quite real and quite qualified. But the property that they asked to see is over $9 million. And in my market, that is, well, I'll just say insane. And so honestly, it was about all that I could do to keep from choking when I was on the phone with him, but regained my composure and I said, certainly as you might expect in this price range, will be asked to provide verification of assets ahead of time. And of course, that's just something as simple as a letter from your financial advisor or private banker just stating that you have sufficient assets on account. There's no personal information. There's nothing that is intrusive, just a basic letter. And he said, oh, okay, that's great. I can get that done this afternoon. Right. And that to me is the key because the folks that are the most qualified are the ones that understand that concept and that have no problem producing that kind of verification. And so to me, it was just like a routine exercise. And the more that you do that, the more comfortable you get asking. Because I think going back to some realtors who maybe haven't been in the market terribly long or who haven't been in a more normal marketplace, they're kind of nervous to ask those questions,
Yeah.
right? It's a little intimidating. How do you handle it?
Well, the same, and it's interesting because I think the buyer who truly has the wealth and the portfolio and the wherewithal to make that type of purchase, they're not going to be offended by asking that question.
Yep.
And I think agents need to understand that. And if for some reason you do talk to the buyer and they do seem put off because you've asked for proof of funds, the first thing I share with them is, well, if I were listing your home, wouldn't you want me to ask for proof of funds before a
Sure.
stranger off of the street and through your front door?
Yep.
It's just a good protocol. And people understand that. And so that's actually a red flag. If someone gets mad or upset
Hmm.
or put out because you've asked for that, that really should be a red flag in most cases. Now there are exceptions. I mean, I think if you have a buyer who is a very high profile celebrity or an athlete, or a high profile business person, they're the CEO of a large firm, and you can Google and you recognize them, and there's enough information to get together. Perhaps that's not necessary, and that might be the person who might be a little put out by that. But the way that I don't know for myself, the way that I handle it, if I find that I feel like I'm in any way treading on thin ice, which is rare, but if I feel like I've hit a nerve in any way with that buyer by broaching that subject, I quickly put it on the seller and say, I'm so sorry, but our sellers have requested that we provide this information prior to showing the property to any buyer. And so suddenly it's not about them, it's about any buyer. Um,
Sure.
so that helps get it off of you is to put it on the seller because the seller is the person behind the curtain. It's the person
Yeah.
seeing the property.
Yeah.
And that helps.
Why is it so important, right? What would the real ramification be, even if it wasn't somebody who was totally qualified, right? I know it would be wasting our time and wasting the
Yes.
sellers, but there's some other things at play, aren't there, when we talk about really high-end listings?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's the obvious things, from time to time we're reminded, and we need to be reminded, particularly in markets like this, that, everybody who calls on a property is not a buyer. And they might be even somebody who wants to be a buyer. We talk about aspirational pricing. I think there's aspirational buyers, people who would love to be able to purchase that property, and they may have wealth, but the guy that calls about the $9 million listing, may be able to buy a $4 million listing. Clearly, this is somebody of wealth. That doesn't mean he can buy the $9 million listing. So we have aspirational buyers. But beyond that, there's a safety piece. There are
Yeah.
people out there, and it's not common, but it happens. We read about it frequently, where there's actual criminals, that are trying to get into homes like this, whether it's theft or whether it's bodily harm or who knows what. You have to take safety precautions. So it's very important that we know who we're walking into a home with, because in many cases we're walking into a home with strangers.
Yeah.
When they come by personal referral, obviously it kind of peels that layer away. But when they call off on the phone, or they shoot you with a text, or they say, "Do you mind if we speak over WhatsApp?" That's not our buyer.
Now, I will disagree because I've got some very high-end clients who do enough international travel that they're using WhatsApp. So we don't want to instantly rule that out. But the people that just like hedge
Yep.
about communicating, I think that's important.